A blessed and beautiful one to you and yours. Welcome to it. This is African Diaries. Time for us to get into that conversation. I did tell you that it was twofold, and we kickstart off with the first end of the chat. Right now, across the world, the question on whether smartphones belong in schools has sparked fierce debate. Now, while countries such as Finland and South Korea are enforcing new classroom phone bans to curb distraction and protect mental health, others are arguing that technology, especially smartphones, can be a powerful equalizer. Advocates say that mobile devices can bridge learning gaps, unlock access to digital resources, and prepare students for the future of the world of work. Now, our next guest who joins us is for the motion that technology is a powerful tool and children should be exposed to it. We speak to Paul Ndiho, who is a global social commentator and the CEO of Ndiho Media, a strong advocate for the use of smartphones and advancements in technologies being introduced into education. He believes that rather than banning these tools, we should be training teachers, modernizing curricula, and creating policies that guide safe and effective integration. Tonight, we are exploring the question, can smartphones and advanced technologies truly complement education, or are they quietly widening the digital divide? Good evening to you, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to African Diaries.
Thank you, Shayla, for having me on your platform.
Mr. Paul, let's start off with looking at some findings. Now, UNESCO reports that over 40% of education systems are now restricting smartphones in classrooms. Why do you still believe that phones belong inside the learning environment when so many countries are moving in the opposite direction?
You know, I don't think as Africans we have the luxury of wanting to stay behind while other countries are advancing. We live in a digital economy, every sector from agriculture to journalism, where we are to medicine to governance, everything runs on technology. Smartphones are no longer a luxury. Let me repeat that. I think smartphones are no longer a luxury. They are a tool, if used properly, that can take us to the next life that we want to live. They can open up so many opportunities for young people. I think, for me personally, I would think that having smartphones in schools does not only encourage learning, it's a great tool for learning. For example, Africa, in most places in Africa, we lack electricity, or there's no internet connectivity. We don't have libraries. We don't have access to some of the best lecturers, right? So the only tool that a lot of people have is a smartphone. That smartphone can be used as a bridge to cross to the uncharted waters. Take, for example, I've met young people and I've crisscrossed the continent. I've been in places where young people in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Johannesburg, where you are using smartphones to develop apps, are using smartphones to put things on TikTok. They have created businesses that have turned into legitimate businesses where they're making a living, making those apps or creating content. So I think, personally, I think it's a learning tool, a research lab, a camera. It can be a creative studio, and in many cases, a getaway to global opportunity.
That is, I do see your point, Mr. Paul. However, several metadata analyses show improved classroom focus after phones were restricted. Now, what hard evidence do we have that smartphone integration proves that academic performance would then increase, is what I would firstly ask you. And secondly, as much as you have emphasized the access to opportunities, do we not need a steady if you will, a set of scholars that are ready to pursue challenge head on, as opposed to individuals who are losing attention spans due to these very smartphones that we want in the classroom?
I think your concerns are valid, and a lot of parents, including myself, are concerned about that. But unfortunately, where we are today, we cannot afford to be the only people who are left behind. Africa has had the advantage of leapfrogging. When it came to mobile, instead of using landlines, we leapfrogged into mobile technology. The mobile telecommunication systems or networks in Africa are even more advanced than the mobile communication systems here in the United States. And this is one of the most developed countries, right? So that digital divide, for sure, in situations whereby it's the new literacy divide. When you deny these young Africans access to those smartphones, you are not just limiting screen time, you are not just limiting their access to whatever is happening out in the world. The intellectual balance of power has been shifting in our favor. Why? Because of technology. Why? Because of access to smartphones. I think Africa is the most connected continent in terms of mobile continent on the planet. You have more young people in Africa who are using smartphones, who are using all technology to connect to the world. That's why I said that the intellectual balance of power has been shifting in our favor. If it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe we were lagging behind. But today, we cannot afford to stay behind. We cannot afford to ban these tools from schools. For those people who, yes, are lagging behind, maybe they're not paying attention, we could figure out a way to incorporate some of these ethics into, like, the curriculum, for example. If students are in class, maybe they shouldn't touch their cell phones or use them to cheat on their tests. If you brought that argument up, I would agree with you. But to say that there should be a total ban on smartphones, I totally disagree with that. Because the way the world is going is a completely different world than you and I grew up in. We live in a totally different world. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I was attending an event, and who happened to be there speaking to young people? It was Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. Guess what he told these young people? He said that he doesn't have any children. And I'm just going to paraphrase what he said. He said that if he had young children, he would not waste time teaching them to learn Chinese, to learn French, to learn all the other languages, Russian. But he would focus on teaching his kids to learn like a coding language, like for young kids, like Scratch, Brokey, Lao, C++, Python. That's what he told these people. And he said that the fact that they have these tools in their palms, this is the future of the world. This was coming from the Apple CEO, the person who has taken Apple computers to a $1 trillion company, one of the most valuable companies in the world. So what did I take away from that message? For me, it resonated with me. When I came back, I told my wife, I said, we need to figure out how to incorporate technology into everything that we do. As I speak to you today, my kids, I have two little girls. One is 9, another one is 6. I've taught them how to code. They play with these tools because that's the language of the future. So anybody telling students not to access these tools, I think they are not just killing their potential, but they are limiting their abilities to compete on a global stage.
The voice there of global social commentator and CEO of Ndiho Media, that is Paul Ndiho, joining us this evening, and we are really looking at the question: can smartphones and advanced technologies truly complement education, or are they quietly widening the digital divide? Mr. Paul, you make such brilliant points there, by the way. However, I will go back to the reality that we still see stats such as here in South Africa, over 80 plus percent of grade 4 learners cannot read for understanding, right? We still see stats across the continent with respect to the entry levels to university. So are we really maximizing on the use of smartphones? Because it's one thing to be exposed to technology. It's another to not know what it is you're exposing the child to. Now, you spoke about coding. However, coding isn't something that children use smartphones for, is the truth, right? We're talking social media, connecting with friends, and I wonder and I question if have we really introduced that foresight into a child's understanding if very many adults don't use phones for coding either? And so can we really argue that that stands to be a benefit if it's not the current practice?
Well, think about it like this from the African context. So most students or most people on the continent lack access to computers, lack access to electricity. You are in South Africa, where you guys a couple years ago, I'm sure it's still going on. You had a lot of blackouts all the time, right? Think about it in terms of that the only computer this student has access to is the smartphone, because your smartphone is as good as a computer, or if not better, as most computers that we have, right? So the only avenue would be the smartphone. This student can communicate with his teachers. They can do math, use it as a calculator. They can do reading, read text, let's say somebody can share something or watch even tutorials on YouTube. I'll give you an example. I'm an avid video editor. Guess where I learned how to do that? By watching YouTube. So if I could do that, learning how to do all these things on a smartphone, on a laptop, why can't a kid in Johannesburg, a kid in Cape Town, a kid in some rural part in Ghana do the same thing? So I think having, I agree with your argument. You raised some very, very important issues there. But I think that we shouldn't stifle innovation. We should allow these young people to explore the different opportunities. Because the way I learned, I did not access a computer growing up in Uganda until I was in high school, until I started getting really comfortable with it when I was at university. So those days are gone. Today, we live in a world that is revolving around technology. Look at how these tech companies are massively investing in a new technology. Take, for example, artificial intelligence. They are investing in it because they see opportunities there. They see how technology is going to transform the world. They see how these smartphones that we are talking about could be the gateway to new opportunities. You can literally be seated in the comfort of your living room and you are able to connect with me. Right now, we are using smartphone technology. If it wasn't for a smartphone technology, you and I would not be having this conversation. So, as much as the risks, which I agree, I think we should figure out how to mitigate those risks than trying to outright ban the devices from schools. One, again, I'll argue that these gadgets are tools that can help a lot of people access a world they dream about.
Mr. Paul, I want to turn to mental health and distraction, right? Now, countries such as Finland, the UK, Australia have cited attention, cyberbullying, and anxiety as reasons for these bans. Moreover, we have noticed and we have realized that there is a lack of readiness or preparedness by the African education system to integrate the use of smartphones. So, with those two hanging in the balance, would you not say, or suffice it to say, that perhaps a partial ban is required so that we can ready the education system for these smartphones, that they would prove to be beneficial and fruitful for the learner, as opposed to continue to perpetuate the problems we already see in society?
I find those studies are very interesting in a sense that they are trying to ban some of these. Yes, maybe they have a point, but on the other hand, I also think that when it comes to Africa, really, we haven't even started. These are countries that have been on the cutting edge of technology. So for them, they're already ahead. Maybe if we get to that point where we see that things are not going in our favor, we can reconsider. But for them to even to come up with proposals trying to target some African countries that are barely using technology, these countries are just starting to learn what technology is about, what these mobile phones are all about. I think maybe we should figure out how to incorporate, for example, ethics in classrooms. Let's say students can't use a mobile phone, can't use these whatevers, these tools while they're in a school setting or if they're on a school campus, instead of saying let's ban them. Yes, those studies could also be relative in a sense that it depends on who does this study. I can bet you that if somebody who is benefiting from these devices did a similar study using the same metrics, they would come up with a different result. Why? Because clearly those studies are based on people who are anti-technology. So if you had somebody do a similar study who is a proponent of new technology, I'm sure the results would be so different. So that's why I said it's a relative term. But again, to your point, I think parents have a role to play here. Schools, school principals, school administrations, teachers have a role to play here. Even the students themselves have a duty to play in this case. They shouldn't misuse some of these tools. When it comes to reading, I first exposed my daughters when they were like really young to tablets. And the difference between them learning how to play around with the tablet, being able to play with the different tools, the difference between them and the kids who did not do that is almost night and day. My kids were able to speak, to read faster than some of those kids who are not exposed to those tools. If I put my kids on a laptop or on a computer, they can figure out what's wrong with it. They can almost troubleshoot it because they've had that exposure. So why are we denying those young people who might have that as their only avenue, an opportunity to explore these tools? For me personally, I think that using technology responsibly is the way to go instead of banning it.
Mr. Paul, argument heard and understood. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This was rather fruitful, and you have given us much to ponder on.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
The voice there of global social commentator and the CEO of Ndiho Media, advocating for the use of smartphones and advanced technologies in schools to complement education. That being Mr. Paul Ndiho. It is 59 after 10 p.m. Central African time, a minute before the second hour. We'll have an opportunity to further carry out this conversation. Remember, this evening, the question at hand is, can smartphones and advanced technologies truly complement education, or are they just quietly widening this digital divide we find ourselves in? We will be speaking to Kate Farina, who is the head of administration at SFC South Africa, an organization that advocates against the use of smartphones and regulation of the use of technology in schools. That after this.
From Cape to Cairo, every beat tells a story. It's African Diaries on Channel Africa.